What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's going on with the economic calendar moving forward and why this week is going to be absolutely massive for Tesla stock. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY in uninvested cash. The offer ends at the end of March, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the markets. So the market saw a very, very interesting day. Looking at the stocks out there, we saw some tickers in the red, some in the green. Tesla was showing some weakness because we got some bad news that came out, and right now we are still showing that weakness because we're below a key trend line. But whether or not this weakness is going to last is going to depend on a lot of big factors. That's why I want to break down some factors and news, and I'll talk about the charts a little bit later. So let's talk about this. What's going on with Tesla? I just want to mention that Tesla had this news right over here that it had to fix the software for over 1.2 million imported and Chinese-made cars. I went over this in a lot more detail on Friday, so I'm not going to go over every detail, but I just want to say that this was pretty negative. Many headlines were saying this is a big recall again and this and that, but the reality is it just required a software update to fix some safety hazard issues. Chinese regulators came out and they expressed some concerns about Tesla's safety features, so that's why Tesla had to do this large software update. But keep in mind, it's not a typical recall, it's just a software update, so Tesla's going to be completely fine. Now, this ended up offsetting the news that Tesla's redesigned Model Y would be coming to North America. This was announced to be coming to the US, Canada, and Europe. Very, very awesome news. This is the redesigned Model Y SUV. It has a starting price of just shy of about $60,000. And as you guys can see, we have this new demand that's going to be coming because of this. So Tesla has lots of pre-orders that should be coming out very soon. And within just a couple of months, we're going to be seeing them on the streets very soon in the US. So I'm very excited about this. Can't wait to see what this leads to. This news caused a small pop in Tesla, but then as time went on, it began to slow down. So we'll see what Tesla says about this during their earnings report. Now, another thing that's worth noting is the fact that I'm seeing headlines about how the rollback for the $7,500 credit for Tesla has been more negative, at least for the shorter term. It will be affecting some of Detroit's automakers as well, according to Dan Ives. But he mentioned that for Tesla, on the other hand, what gives Tesla a big advantage is that 90% of what's going to drive the share price up is going to be autonomous and AI. That's the ultimate story. So that's his opinion. He thinks that AI is going to be so huge that's going to have a very profound effect on the share price. Ives mentioned that he sees Tesla hitting a $2 trillion valuation by the end of this year, hitting the share price of $550. Morgan Stanley's Adam Jonas had um, very similar expressions about Tesla. He mentioned that he also sees AI being a key growth driver for Tesla, and I think they also mentioned that AI and robotics will become, the main thing in a lot of people's minds. He also said the same thing about Nvda. And then I also believe that Dan Ives said that he thinks that another big driver for Tesla is going to be their sales. He thinks that 2025 is going to be very strong for EV deliveries. So we'll see about that. I'm very optimistic for Tesla nonetheless. So we'll see how things end up going. For other factors out there, Wedbush and Piper Sandler both gave Tesla outperform ratings, saying Tesla's going to be doing better than the majority of stocks out there. And then we also have some news that the price-to ratio is dipping just a bit. We are on a temporary downtrend on Tesla, by the way, but things can improve depending on how earnings end up going, so just keep that in mind. Mondays are historically green about 53% of the time, and we tend to see more volatility at 11 o'clock a.m. and also at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then besides that, I'm not seeing anything else that's too crazy on the news that I haven't gone over already. So we're just going to focus on what's happening with the rest of the markets. So regarding the rest of the markets, before I break down more details about Tesla and the charts, just know this. The market was quite mixed on Friday. We had Tesla in the red, Microsoft and Nvidia were all in the red, but we saw many tickers in the flats, basically like Apple and a few more like that. We saw some sectors that were kind of flat, such as like the finance sector and many others out there. So we'll see what happens from this point on. Very mixed market on Friday. For tomorrow, by the way, it's going to be Monday, January 27th, 2025. We have new home sales at 10 a.m. Then at 10:30 a.m., we have the Dallas Fed manufacturing numbers. Besides that, there's nothing else that's too crazy coming out. On Tuesday, we have the Richmond Fed giving some data involving manufacturing at 10 a.m. And then Wednesday is going to be very important because we have FOMC. We have Jerome Powell giving a speech, so keep that in mind. So Monday has some data, but it's going to be a little bit more minor. Things get very serious on Wednesday with Jerome Powell's speech. Now, the market thinks there's a 99.5% chance that the Fed is going to essentially keep rates the same, not really change anything. We'll see about that. We'll see what they end up doing. Most likely, if the market's pricing this, then that's what they're going to do. However, whether or not we get a big pump in the markets or a dump is going to depend more on Jerome Powell. What he ends up saying about the markets, what he says about inflation and factors like that, that's going to be very, very key. Now, for other factors out there, we have SoFi, AT&T, and a couple of banks announcing earnings on Monday. On Tuesday, we have Boeing, GM, and then Starbucks announcing earnings. Then for Wednesday, we have Tesla, Meta, Microsoft, IBM, and a few more. And then on Thursday, we have Apple also doing their things. So get ready for all of this, guys. It's going to be very important starting on Wednesday for lots of volatility. On Monday, don't forget we're entering the market on a neutral phase. Although the market's pumped really hard, we're still neutral. We're not extremely greedy or extremely fearful. We're just stuck in between. The market was very fearful. We got a very, very fast run up. That's why we're back to neutral. We're very close to greed, so we're not that far from it on that indicator. The put to call option ratio is at extreme greed right now. Typically, when we're at extremes, that suggests the market's going to form a top soon. Not always a guarantee, but it's a possibility. And then last but not least, the VIX is neutral. We'll be watching to see if we get a bounce or not. Anyways, that was a lot to take in. That is it for all of our data and news about the markets. I hope that was very concise. I did this in like 6 minutes. So that being said, let's focus on the charts from the rest of this video. What is happening to Tesla and the markets? Well, looking at Tesla, we have one problem, okay? I love the company. Its fundamentals are amazing, but you have to understand the truth, which is that Tesla has been on a downtrend since December. If you look at this, we had a high in the 480s. We rejected, came back up to this trend line and rejected. We came back up here just a couple of weeks ago, then we rejected again. And so far, we just keep on rejecting off this yellow line. We're really struggling to break out of this trend line, which is showing some weakness. I also want to mention that we had this support. So this blue trend line was support since October. This is what Tesla was riding up. Instead of holding this, Tesla is rejecting and losing this support. So it's not the best of signs, at least for Tesla moving forward. This could be an indicator that Tesla is showing weakness as we're struggling to break past this. If Tesla hypothetically gets back above 415 and reclaims the yellow trend line, I'm going to be looking for a bounce for the 420s. If we can't reclaim 415, which is, I believe, the previous all-time high before this year, we're going to be looking for a move lower. Watch 410 if we can't get back above that 410 to 415. We're looking for a continuation back down to where this imbalance is around this 399 or so area, or the very, very low 400s, or even below that if we continue to fall. We could be dipping to the lower 400s or below for now, as Tesla's showing some weakness compared to the market. So the most likely possibility is we pump in the morning, which Tesla typically does. It's a little push here. If we can't get back above 420, 415 to 420, then yes, we could be looking for a rejection and continuation lower to the low 400s. We'll see if 400 holds or not, so watch that very, very closely. So watch these levels just to be safe. We have a bullish and bearish case, but the bearish case as of right now looks more probable because of the trend on Tesla, because we keep on making lower highs and we keep rejecting off our trend line of resistance. So the odds favor this continuing to dip even more. So please keep that in mind, guys. For other factors out there, we have SPY. Okay, SPY is showing a little bit of weakness. We're rejecting off this resistance at 610. And then when you look at, for example, the daily charts, the daily has a bearish divergence that's developing. It's not fully developed quite yet. And then simultaneously, we have a bunch of gaps to fill on the daily. So we ran really hard ever since we got a decent CPI and ever since Donald Trump became inaugurated, right? The market's been just pushing and pushing and pushing, which is awesome. But the problem is now that we pumped so hard without any sort of pullback. We have all these gaps to fill. There's a bunch of them. And then simultaneously, you have to remember that the way the market is moving, it's going to be dictated by other factors. So if SPY breaks 610 tomorrow, if we get back above 608 to 610, watch for 612, then 615 as our potential targets. That's going to be very important for us. So please keep that in mind. We'll be watching to see if we can try to break resistance. If we get back above that, the very, very key areas right over here. So if we break past 610 to 612, we're looking for new all-time highs. If we end up losing support right here around this 606 area, I'm looking for the gap fill back down towards 603 or below. My gut is telling me that we're getting a rejection here, so we could be making a lower high than reject and start dipping down to fill this gap around this 603 zone. So be careful, guys. We could be dipping a little bit lower. There's going to be a risk of us returning back down to about 603. If we end up losing support, and I'd end up favoring that a little bit more. I think that when you look at the 4 hour, what's going to likely happen is we will likely kind of like consolidate for some time like this. And then we could be looking for a dip back down towards like 603 or lower. So keep that in mind. For the QQQ, we're seeing something very similar. We're rejecting right here. We have a range, but notice that we're on the lower end of this range. And then when you look at the daily charts, we have this gap to fill down here. So what I think is going to happen is very simple. We're going to likely just consolidate a bit here on the QQQ. If we break 533, we could turn bullish. If we can't break that, we're going to likely be dipping down to fill this gap towards 524 or below. So please keep that in mind, guys. There's a good chance that we will be dipping stuff just like that. So I think that's there's a very, very good chance that we dip lower and we come back down to fill this gap. And I think we're favoring a move back down to about 524. So keep that in mind. That's the most likely possibility. For the Russell 2000 IWM, please keep in mind that there's also a little bit of weakness right here. We got this rejection off this 230 area. We were not able to hold above that. And if we end up losing essentially 226, we're looking for a dip lower towards the lower 220s. So if we're bullish, you want to see us break 230 to start pushing higher. If we can't hold above that, we're going to likely be dipping back down to about 226.5. Eventually, this gap fill down here. I favor this a little bit more as the most likely possibility, so watch that very, very closely. I say that because of the fact that we're forming a large cup and handle, and I think that this could be a little bit of a dip here before we see a big bounce. On ES, we have the chop zone between the 6160s and 6120s. We're known for kind of consolidating in that range. I want to see us break past 6160 to remain bullish. If we can't, we could be like continuing to dip. So as of right now, I think there's a good chance that we could be consolidating. Then there might be some downside coming to fill that gap. So watch this very, very closely. If we come back down and we can't hold 6120, we're looking for that gap fill for about 6,080. So watch that very, very closely. So be careful, guys. There's this gap fill right down here around 6080. So give this some time to develop, and we'll see what ends up happening from here as we have that gap to fill. I anticipate there's going to be some consolidation and a dip lower to fill that gap. So watch that very, very well. For other factors out there, we have NQ. NQ has resistance at the 22,000 area. We got to see if we break that or not. If we can't hold above that, we're looking for a dip back down to fill this gap around 21,714. Let's look for a retest here and then a rejection back down to 21,700. And we'll have to see how things end up going here. I do anticipate some downside if we can't break above 22,000. So break 22,000, you're looking for 22,200 as our targets. If we can't break 22,000 on NQ, we favor the downside. I think we're favoring downside as the most likely possibility to fill this gap. I think that's going to be coming very, very soon. I think Bitcoin's just consolidating. It's been stuck for the last 4 or 5 days. So I think Bitcoin's going to do something like this where we just consolidate for a bit. Then we eventually come down to where our 20 EMA zone is, all the way down to 101,000. Once again, just consolidating, not really doing a whole lot. I think that's what Bitcoin will most likely end up doing. Now, for the rest of these individual tickers, please remember that Nvda is showing some weakness because we have a bearish engulfing candle right over here, and we have this gap to fill. So this typically favors downside a little bit more. What's going to likely happen is we rebound a bit to grab liquidity around like the mid 140s. Then we could be dipping to 140 to 138, and we'll see if we get a bounce or not, but just keep that in mind. There is that risk of some downside. For Apple, Apple's on a bit of a downtrend right here. We're looking for essentially the 220 to 221 area as our potential targets. We could be dipping a little bit more here. We'll have to see if we get a bounce or not. We're trying to base at 220. We got to hold that. If we don't hold this, we're going to be dumping a lot more. So I think we're going to likely consolidate. So just keep that in mind. For Netflix, I'm going to go over the rest of these and be a little bit more concise now. Netflix is showing some weakness. Now, here's the thing. So we did a great job at pumping after earnings. Very, very bullish earnings. However, we need to break above, I would say close to 1,000 to remain bullish. As of right now, what's happening is we had a high here. We came down at a lower high, and this typically favors us kind of like returning to this low right here, back down to about 950. So we'll see if we get a bounce or not. So just keep that in mind. For MSTR, we're on a bit of a downtrend. We're slowing down on the 4 hour. We're going to be watching to see if we can reclaim 362 or not. If we can't, we could be dipping back down to about 345. So keep that in mind. There's a little bit of weakness here. Looking at the 4 hour, the fact that there is a larger accumulation, this could be a dip and then a bounce that could be coming. So I'm going to be looking for us to see if we could hold 362. If not, we're going to be dumping to about 340, and then we'll see if we get a bounce or not. But I do favor a little bit more downside. So please keep that in mind for MSTR. For others out there, we have Celsius. This is showing some life. We have a slight divergence right here on the 4 hour. I think that this could be trying to retest 25.97. If that breaks, we're looking for a little bit more upside to 26.72, but then we'll see if you reject off that or not. We need to break 26.7 to remain bullish. If not, we could reject again. I think there's going to be a small push close to the 26s, and we'll see if we get a rejection. That's what I'm seeing, at least for the time being. For other factors out there, we have Supermicro. Supermicro is also in a very, very interesting position. We're looking for this to retest 32.95 to 32.6. We could be dipping just a bit here, and we'll see if we get some kind of bounce or not. So please give this some time, and we're going to be very, very patient, at least nonetheless. Something else that's worth mentioning is that as far as this market is developing, we also have Palantir. Palantir has a nice kind of like cup and handle like structure. We're going to be watching to see if we could hold 78 or not. Otherwise, we could be dipping to about 76, and we'll see if we get a bounce or not from here. So I find this to be the most likely possibility. So please keep that in mind, guys. I'm going to actually skip to a couple more. I actually have something that's coming up real quick, guys, so I might have to finish this video right now. So for coin, look for a retest of 292. We'll see if we get a bounce or not. So look for a little bit more downside. For Amazon, we're stuck in the middle between 235 and 233. We're going to be watching this very, very closely, so watch and see what we end up doing here. If 233 fails us, we're looking for a dip to about 230, so we're stuck in between. For Meta, we look a bit more bullish. We have to see if we could break 650 or not. If we break 650, we remain bullish. If not, we could be dipping here before it tries to continue to go higher, so keep that in mind. For Microsoft, we're kind of dipping right here. We could be dipping to about 439. We'll see if we get a bounce or not off of that, but look for a small pullback here, and we'll see what the reaction happens to be. For Google, we have 202 as our resistance. We have 199 as our support. We could be dipping to 199, so we'll see what ends up happening. And with that being said, guys, we're going to be waiting to see what the Fed gives us to see how this affects the VIX. The VIX is at support in the 14, so we'll see if we get a bounce or not. And we'll see how the 10-year and the dollar are affected by the Fed. With that being said, guys, although Tesla and the market are showing some weakness, we'll see if we get some kind of big bounce or not. So give this the time it needs. We could be pulling back a bit more on Tesla, so give this some time, and we'll see how things end up going. We'll see what happens with Tesla's big news, but look for a little bit more downside for the time being, and we'll see if we can base at 400 or not. So that being said, guys, I thank you for listening. Have a good rest of your day. Enjoy some football, and I'll be back tomorrow morning with another update. Until then, thank you for listening, and peace out.